sometimes, the first few chapters of our story is written. Things come in a certain package, but we get to choose what the rest of the story is going to be like. Hello, and welcome to Spiritually Hungry Summer Snack Edition.
Yes. Last summer you didn't like snacks, but I guess we're back with snacks.
You keep saying snacks.
Snacks work.
I'm adaptable.
People like snacks.
I'm flexible.
Who doesn't like a snack?
So today we're going to talk about, I think, something that people often confuse. And I'll start with a story. So a few weeks back, we were in Europe and we had quite a bit of travel, and we ended up on a boat with a friend. And we took a little boat from his boat to get to the dock. And, I'm super curious. I noticed that the man that was working there, it's a small village we were in, the man that runs the little boat had what looked like his son with him helping out. So I said, "Oh, is this your son?" And he said, "Yes." And then his son started talking, and I was just so taken by his accent and quite confused because we were in Italy. His father had a heavy, heavy Italian accent. The son looked kind of like his father, but he had a very, very strong Australian accent. I was confuzzled. So I asked him, "Where do you go to school? Is it like a local school, an international school?" And he said, "I go to school here." I said, "Oh," I said, "Well, then," straightforward. I said, "Where do you get your accent from?" He said, "My mom is Australian." And I said, "Wow, what an interesting accent." And we got to talking. So I said, "Well, have you been to Australia? Do you travel abroad? What are your plans?" And he's graduating, and he's shared, and this is like a short little ride, but he shared that he feels a lot of pressure at his age of 18 because he has to make a decision about his life. Like, he loves the sea life, he loves the water like his father, but what does he want to do with his life? Because this decision will be the decision he makes for the rest of his life. And I was so confused by that. And I think that, I think generally we have the conversations we have with people they're more flexible, and I can make a choice, I can make a decision, I can change it. But he was so sure that it had to be absolute for him. So I said, you can always change your mind. You might try something for a year or 2 years or 3 and then decide it's not for you. And you're young. Like, you can change your mind many times throughout your lifetime. You have free will. So free will, he looked at me and I said, yes. And then our friend who actually studies Kabbalah, he said, "Well, let's talk about free will." He's like, what do you believe free will to be? And this is the topic of today. So let me ask you your definition before I finish the story.
Well, I don't know if I can get it in a few seconds or even minutes. But I think it's the understanding that we get to direct our lives. And I think this is where the spiritual path of Kabbalah is different maybe than other paths, in that it's not preordained. I think on some level, the best of our life is set, meaning we're born, the end goal is meant to be me in my best development as a person, spiritually, physically, in all ways, and at the highest level of fulfillment, joy. Now, that path is up to me. Meaning, will I take a roundabout path, choose certain things that maybe aren't best for me, or I make mistakes and then eventually get there? Or maybe a person makes choices that he or she doesn't even get there in this lifetime, it's next lifetime or the lifetime after that. So we have a choice, not where we begin nor where we end in lifetimes, but rather how fast and how enjoyable the path is.
Which is one of my favorite premises of Kabbalah, because often, and we see this with our own children, our oldest is 26, and he's like, "Do I choose this? If I choose this, then what? Or if I choose to be with this person, then my life will look like that. Like, how do I know what's the right thing?" And I always, there's parallel universes. You can choose this way, but where you end up might be very differently than what you had intended, right? And there's many, many options. That's why people have different kinds of soulmates, different kinds of opportunities that come to us so that we can exercise our free will. And I often say also is that sometimes, the first few chapters of our story is written, things come in a certain package, but we get to choose what the rest of the story is going to be like. So back on the boat, my friend said, "Well, do you really think that everybody has free will? Because you're a spiritual person. And so being spiritual, you understand that you can change things." And I said, "No, everybody has free will." So I told him another story that my best friend who works at the center, and she studies Kabbalah by default, kind of, she once said, well, you didn't have free will in, having Josh. So Josh is our son, one of our sons who has Down syndrome. And I said, well, what do you mean? Of course I had free will. How he came to this world was his process, is our process. It's absolutely divine. What we chose to do with it, how we chose our response to be, is our free will. And that's everything. That changes your whole entire life, right? And we can unpack what that looked like and how, if Josh hadn't come into our lives, what our lives would have looked like. But more importantly, it's so perfect because he came again with those first few chapters, and maybe I would have written that story differently had I had the choice to. The free will, though, is the most beautiful part, because then I get to decide what that story becomes and where we go with it. Right.
And what I would say is that we don't get to choose what happens to us in life for all things. This is one example, but we do get to choose what our experience of it is going to be, and what our transformation from it is going to be. And
for good or bad, by the way.
Well, that's my point. What I was going to say is that, and this is why spirituality is so important, and the right consciousness and thought process is so important, because unless, I strongly believe this, unless a person is on a true spiritual path of transformation and growth, it will be much more difficult to make those, especially unplanned for parts of our lives, be a great experience. And intertwined with that is the desire for it to change us in the most positive ways and make us a better person. We've met many people who've been through even similar things that we've been to, and rather than making them a better person, a more joyful person, it's made them a more bitter person, a more difficult person. So yes, there's definitely choices that we make, and that, as we said before, influences the duration and experience of our path. Certainly those things that come into our lives, children, any type of child, business issues, any type of issue, with a spiritual background, we're able to receive them in the way they were meant. Mm-hmm. And how were they meant? They were meant to somehow bring us joy, and they were meant to somehow to change us. And those two things are intertwined. The more we allow them to change us in positive ways, the more the experience becomes joyful.
Well, it reminds me of another story, because at the time that we had Josh, we were super curious just about other people's experiences of having a child with Down syndrome. And I really applaud us, even now after all these years, 23 years later, that we were so curious. We sought out families, and there are many families that wanted to speak to other parents and kind of help them through it. But what we did is we spoke to different kinds of families, right? We wanted to see different perspectives, like people who had, there's actually a village, I forgot where it is, that they adopt only children.
I think it's a Scandinavian country, if I'm not mistaken.
Only children who have Down syndrome. And they believe that they are like angels, and the whole village is just children with Down syndrome. And
adopted by these families.
By these families, right? And so we were blown away by that, and we were so inspired by them. And then we saw people who gave up their child for adoption, and then people who decide never to have kids again, like just a gamut, right? And some who raised their own. So this one specific family, and I'm so happy we did that, because it really made a lasting imprint on me. It was the Versaces. And we went to their house.
Not the famous Versace.
No.
You think, yeah.
We drove to their house. I remember when we walked in, it smelled like pain. It smelled like pain, and the air felt stiff, and I was super hypersensitive just emotionally anyway. So I remember that I picked that up very quickly. And this particular family was devoutly religious. I think they were Catholic.
Yeah, please.
And this woman who had a baby born with Down syndrome, her whole life since she was a child, she prayed to God every single night on her hands and knees, or just her knees, I suppose, and begged God never to give her a child with Down syndrome.
Right,
that was
she had like a cousin or
she had
something?
An aunt.
An aunt.
And that was her whole prayer, her whole life. And then she gets married and she gets pregnant for the first time. And what happens? She has a child.
Crazy.
Child diagnosed with Down syndrome. And she didn't believe in abortion. So she had the child, and she gave the child up for adoption. Because she's so religious and she doesn't believe in abortion, they decided they were never going to try to have a child again and maybe adopt a healthy, typically healthy child. That story struck me for so many reasons. That's not what this podcast is about, but I think it's a perfect example in how we choose to exercise or not exercise our free will, right? And some things we just hear and we think they're a death sentence, and we think it's the end of our life. But the truth is, we wake up every day with the ability to choose every response. We can choose to love. We can choose to be present. We can choose to let go of expectations. We can choose forgiveness, right? That is really the purpose of life, right? As we often say, the process is the purpose. It's everything that you become, that you learn, and how you transform from the minute your story starts, which again, we have no control over, and how it ends, which we have no control over.
And I think it's so important. And you get to choose your experience of life. So as we said before, you might not get to choose what happens. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But you definitely get to choose how it changes you and how joyful it makes you.
I just said that. Okay, I want to say something else.
I just like to repeat what you say because I think it's so important. I don't want to.
You just repeated what I said, but used one different word.
That's really true. I have to listen to this podcast. But
it's like looking in the mirror.
If that is the case, it's definitely worth repeating.
And you said it better.
No. You said it better. For sure.
So Dr. Ellen Langer, who we've had on our podcast, and I'm super inspired by her for many reasons. Also, I think her work is so important because her mantra kind of, and the under score of kind of what she's doing in terms of body, mind, unity is that whether you make the right choice or you don't, it's how you engage with the choice after you make it. So basically, there's no right or wrong. It's what you do with the choice you've made, because you're never going to know, right? You can choose something. Oh, if only I knew that, I would have chosen something else. Or you choose, oh my God, I wish I didn't do that. But it doesn't matter either way. The choice has been made. So now how are you going to respond to it? Which is very aligned with Kabbalah.
Right. And in that same vein, I think a consciousness that helps me, and I try to share it as often as I can with people who are experiencing a challenge in life, and all of us experience one degree or another challenges in life, is the fact that it's coming from the light of the Creator. What does that mean? We are surrounded by a force. We came into this world to change, to grow, to develop. And the good news is that we are not in this alone, that there's the light of the Creator surrounding us. And anything and absolutely everything that enters into our life has only one purpose: to help us transform so that we become a better version of ourselves. And by becoming a better version of ourselves, we have greater fulfillment and blessings. When you start looking at life in that way, no matter what it is, a child with a disability you didn't ask for, something at work that you didn't want to happen,
financial woes,
financial challenges, if the perspective that you come to life and all the challenges that come with life is this is from the light of the Creator, and therefore it must ultimately be for my benefit, then you start finding the light within it. Then you start finding the blessing within it. And most importantly, you find the transformation within it.
Because it builds you in ways that you cannot find or create on your own. It is actually the roadmap to show you what you, me, each one of us specifically needs to pay attention to grow so that we can receive all the blessings waiting to come to us.
Right.
We think that if we go without any disruption from point A to B or whatever we see our path is, then we're successful. But in fact, it's who you're meant to become. Yeah, then you can appreciate whatever success you arrive to, whatever that looks like. And it might look very different than you imagined it. But I remember when I finally started to live in that realm, life became so much more beautiful and actually, like you said, joyful, because it all makes sense then. There's no highs, there's no lows, there's no chaos, there's nothing bad. It's all for you. It's for the becoming of you.
And I would say added to that is another consciousness thought that I try to keep in mind as often as possible. The life that we're living is not the sum of our soul's experience. We've lived many lifetimes before. We've had countless interactions with different people. And therefore, when somebody comes into my life who might be challenging, who might be difficult, I don't know what kind of soul debt, for example, I have towards them. So that, imagine, to use a simple example, last incarnation, I hurt somebody, right? So in order for my soul to be more complete, I need them to come back into my life and to hurt me. So I might not be able to make sense. Why did this person who I don't even know just, yell at me in the middle of the supermarket for doing something that he thought I did and I didn't do it, right? But that's such a limited perspective. If you open the perspective and you realize that everything that's happening, you want to grab the opportunity, because by the way, maybe your soul has waited 1,000 years for finally this guy to hurt you in this way so that you can finally repay your soul debt to him or her.
Yeah, it's such a powerful
and
perspective.
And And it's not easy. I understand it's not easy to develop, but I think it just makes life much more enjoyable, much more intriguing, by the way, right? Because we have such a short view on even our own experience, our own soul's experience. And if we open that wider and say, look, I might not be able to make sense of everything, but I know there's a much larger story here. And therefore, and I embrace it. And I'm so happy to be paying this debt. I'm so happy to be having this experience.
So I want to add one more layer to that. And I don't think people often think about this and how it hinders their free will, but that's entitlement. Because we're entitled and we go through life with that kind of consciousness, we're not going to look for what you just described. I'm not going to look for the meaning behind, this hurt, that pain, that person, or the situation that happened that I didn't want to happen. Entitlement tells us we shouldn't have to suffer. And I don't believe in suffering, by the way, but sometimes we do need to experience pain, right? It says we deserve things without effort. It whispers that life owes us ease, fairness, a shortcut. And I hear it sometimes even in my own voice, if I'm going to be honest, when I'm really, really tired or like, I feel like why is this feeling so stuck? I'll go back to old movies like, I've already been through this, or I've been through so much, it should be easier now, or this is not what I signed up for. I rarely go to that. That last one I kind of say sometimes if I'm feeling really frustrated. But the spiritual reality is different, right? The Creator is giving us these opportunities. And I think that for our listeners, is a good time to just really ask yourself, where in your life does that entitlement show up? Because it's such a bad word. Nobody likes that. But in truth, when we think that life owes us something, we stop trying to see what we should be giving life, right? And giving life is making sense and making everything connected, even the things that don't feel connected.
And I'll repeat what I said before, and being changed by life.
Yes.
And so I actually gave a lecture about this past weekend, that people make the mistake of thinking a spiritual life is a calm life, when in reality, we're actually in the midst of a battle. Now, the battle doesn't have to be painful, but it does have to be challenging. And if your view of life is this is a process, a joyful process for my soul's development, then the challenges, then what others might call difficulties, are actually processes you embrace for your growth and for your transformation.
So we hope you enjoyed this snack. I do want to offer one more exercise for all of you out there. Ask yourself these questions right now. Where am I trying to control instead of choosing to trust? Where am I operating from entitlement instead of responsibility? And what story am I ready to rewrite? And I would even journal these things and really start exercising your powerful free will.
I would just add that no matter what is entering into your life, it's coming from the light of the Creator for your benefit. But you choose every single day whether it will be a joyful day, regardless of what challenges might be happening, with the right consciousness, with the right attitude. You can make sure that almost every single day is one that is filled with joy, filled with transformation, and they're intertwined and filled with blessings. Enjoy your summer.
Stay spiritually hungry and hydrate.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this snack as much
Maybe
as we
they're
enjoyed
thirsty, our listeners.
recording it.
Yes. Bye.